proposed interventions. Debaters go on. Now it's your moment to have conversation with the President. And at this point in time, Mr. President, I'll hand over to Mr. Cyril to actually conduct the choir. Cyril.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Afternoon, members of the media. I know this choir as being very well harmonized and equally atonal at times. So I'd like to open the floor to our first question. I think I'd like to do it in batches of three, Linda. We'll start with you, but batches of three. I see Marian and Paul. So we'll come to the next round on your right and Linda.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. You mentioned in your State of the Nation address the formation of a set of holding companies for state-owned enterprises. Could you elaborate on the thinking behind that? And is it one of the intentions is to allow for private sector involvement in the subsidiary state-owned companies, or what really is the reason for that? Thank you.
Marianne, Martin.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. President. Maverick. Would you take us into your confidence exactly what books you managed to buy at Class Bookshop yesterday?
What?
Thank you.
What?
Which
Your
books did you
collection
buy?
of books that you acquired at Class Bookshop yesterday.
Paul Vecchiato.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. You spoke to some degree on your advances around in the presidency. Generally, the cabinet is the president's advisory council, the executive council, and the highest decision-making form. So, could you please explain to us the role of this extended advisory grouping that you have, and how are policy decisions and executive decisions then actually made? Thank you very much.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Tyrone. Thank you to you all for being here. Let's start off with Linda's question about what we've put forward as a more centralized ownership model for state-owned enterprises. Obviously, the state is the key owner of our state-owned enterprises, and the various ministries deal with policy issues and also look at how the execution of all that happens. And what we've got right now is a very disaggregated system where your remuneration processes and packages are completely different. Your corporate governance is also not properly streamlined, and your oversight processes and systems are also very, very disconnected and not uniform. What we have sought to do through careful benchmarking and study is to look what others in other countries have done. The Chinese have a centralized system through what they called CASAC, where they centralize their various enterprises and streamline governance. And the Singaporeans have Temasek, which I also had time to go and visit. That has a number of subsidiaries. And as we looked at that and looked at the disjointed way our state-owned enterprises function, we thought it would be most useful and helpful if we had a more centralized system which would be able to coordinate a whole range processes that are involved in share ownership, involvement with the companies or enterprises that are owned. It would revolve around remuneration policy. It would revolve around governance processes and policies, oversight. And in the case of Temasek, it's also a balance sheet type of management capability that they have. And what it also does, what it would do, it would lessen executive involvement in, or the temptation for executives to be involved in operational matters. They would focus more on policy-oriented matters. Now, this is what the Presidential State-Owned Enterprises Commission has proposed. We still need to take it through what I would call the sausage machine, to take it through the various processes so that they have suggested that even legislation should be drafted to that effect. So quite a bit of discussion is going to ensue, but we already have benchmarking that we could look at and see what would fit our situation best from that point of view. Now, obviously, others would argue that put your state-owned enterprises right first before you opt for such a model. And others would say, do it now because that would enhance repairing and putting your state-owned enterprises right. So those are some of the issues that we have to go through. What is clear to us and to me is that we've got to reposition our state-owned enterprises. Some are functioning relatively well. Others have enormous balance sheet challenges like an ESCOM, and some have operational challenges. Transnet is obviously renewing itself and trying to deal with some of the operational challenges like the ports and all that. So we've got a mixture of both opportunity and challenge. And in the midst of all this, we will be able to find some solutions. What is clear is that we should also look at what's going to come out of the Zondo Commission. The Zondo Commission has looked at the malady of our state-owned enterprises, the way the state capture process destroyed not only the balance sheets, operational capability, but also destroyed talent because they denuded some of those state-owned enterprises of talent. And we have a set of challenges that we need to look at. And against this, we then have to look at how best do we charge ahead with the reform of our state-owned enterprises. So the Council has put a proposal on the table which would, if implemented, enhance the operation of our state-owned enterprises in more ways than one. That would be, now you wanted to know, would the private sector be involved? No, not at the holding company level, because that is, the government is the key shareholder and the sole shareholder at the company holding level. And it's possible with some of your subsidiaries, like for instance, would you bring a telecom as a subsidiary? You'll probably bring it as an associated company, because it is, you're no longer the majority shareholder. For instance, would SAA be brought in as a subsidiary? If, for instance, the deal goes through with the parties that SAA or the Department of Public Enterprises is talking to, yes, it could be brought in as a subsidiary. So you would need to look at the full architecture of your corporate structuring or engineering to see how best they are positioned. Now, the dream that I would have is almost to have a Temasek type, even a Cossack type of architecture, where you have line of sight of your various enterprises as government, which is the key shareholder. You know at one glance what is happening through a board that you would have set up, and you know how your subsidiaries are operating, both operationally, governance-wise, talent-wise, remuneration-wise, and a whole range of other things. So you have better oversight. Are we light years away from that? My answer would be we were light years away from that earlier, but I think we could be getting to a solution that would enable us to, as government, to wrap our arms properly around state-owned enterprises and be able, through this type of structure, you would be able to even to have an early warning system of key failures in some of your state-owned enterprises and how best you can intervene. And you would also have emulation, where one would emulate another in terms of top-class performance, the deployment of human capital and all that. So it's an exciting future. Does it have risks? Of course, everything has a risk, but it has great opportunities. Marianne wants to know what books I bought yesterday. It's always difficult for me to go to a bookshop because no sooner do I get there than I'm not accosted. I have to talk to a whole range of people. But I was very, very fortunate yesterday. I met Mr. Macmillan, who has been writing the history of the ANC in the bookshop. He's written the Lusaka years. He's written a number of short books. So I spent quite a bit of time talking to him about his books. He's got another book that he has been writing for years. And he is a historian from Oxford University who just happens to be visiting our country. So it was quite a joy. It's not often that you go to a bookshop and you meet a top class or an outstanding author who is also a historian. I'm a keen student of history, so it was quite pleasant to have him in the bookshop, particularly somebody who knows the organization that I lead so well from the Lusaka days. And he's much older than I am, but he has a keener memory. He says he met me in 1986 when I went there with a COSATU delegation. And it's true, so it was quite a joy. But other than that, I usually biographies and history books, particularly on South Africa and our continent. And the bookstore has introduced me to buying books on art, because it doesn't matter, it does matter. So Paul asks, from Bloomberg, asks about advisors. Every president has advisors. Now, the first line of your advisors are your cabinet, which is constitutionally inspired or delineated, because as president, I have to work with a whole number of colleagues, and the Constitution directs me to appoint ministers. So they are my advisors. But in addition to being my advisors as president, they also have set jobs. And so in the areas where they have set jobs like departments, they are the kingpin advisors, because they, by virtue of being deployed there, they should know everything about, say, water, human settlements, and so forth. So they are the first line of advisors that any president has. They are in, if you like, they are in the inner circle. I sit with them in cabinet, I sit with them in cabinet committees, and beyond that, I then have a phalanx of other officials, from the Director General, who's the Director General of the entire government, and she, or it, the Director General works with other Directors General in the government system, and they have a forum, and their task is to look very closely at policy formulation and policy implementation. So the Director General, who happens to be Ms. Baleni, Pindile Baleni, sits in the presidency, and so they play another role, so that's another layer. And I also have a number of other, if you like, special advisors who would be advising the president on an ongoing basis. And their task is to help get government to be properly knitted together. For instance, a number of the advisors that I've got in the presidency, from, who work on social policy, they don't, social policy, legal advisor, parliamentary counselor, international, and a whole range of others. Their task is to make sure that we knit together the work that government does. And we have now moved to ensuring that we see the presidency as being a collaboration nerve center of government, where we tie in all government departments to work together through the presidency. And that is why we set up the Vulindlela operation, working together with Treasury. That resides in the presidency, and through that we're then able to get many government departments to work together. We also have the Project Management Office, which is the PMO, which looks at specific projects that we embark on. Which projects cannot be pursued on their own in various departments. They've got to be knitted together, and the presidency, which is this real center of government, pulls them all together and get government departments to collaborate. For instance, on the district development model, I have someone who does that through Minister Gungubele's office as well. They ensure that this concept that we came up with of the district development model is properly implemented. So I have a variety of colleagues and people that strengthen the work of the presidency, working together with the deputy president, of course. But we have another added pillar, which is the DPME, monitoring and evaluation, which is supervised by Minister Gungubele. So that whole combination of individuals, and in some cases, like institutions, if you like, helps us. Now, over and above that, I have, to strengthen everything that we do, also appointed a number of outside advisors. On climate change, we appointed a commission that advises, and that they do excellent work. The type of work that we would never be able to have time to do, working together with the Department of Environmental Affairs. We've got the economic policy. They do excellent work as well. working together with Treasury. So the SOE Council would work together with DPME, Department of Public Enterprises. And the strength with that is to be able in government to bring in people who are not necessarily active in government on an ongoing basis, to bring in, as they say in the classics, fresh blood, fresh thinking, and new ideas that are brought to bear on the work that we do in government. So I find this a wonderful combination, a really excellent cocktail of wonderful ideas, wonderful talent, meshed together to produce the type of progress that we are beginning to see in the work that we do. That's what we do.
Thank you, President. I think I saw Wendell earlier, Mike. Christian. So Wendell, Mike, Christian. WMC. Wendell.
Thanks, President Wendell from Reuters. President, I want to ask you about this, the SA's lingering and simmering anti-foreigner sentiment that seems to be prevailing in South Africa. Are you concerned that there is a potential risk of flare-up of xenophobic violence in South Africa? Given and here, perhaps Minister Bugubele can also respond after you responded. Has the security apparatus flagged anything at this stage? How concerned are you guys? And is the security apparatus set up to sort of head off any potential? Certainly, history suggests that that has not been the case. And I want to take a little bit further. There have been reports that the government is considering to reserve jobs for South Africans, given the high unemployment rate, given the impact of COVID. Is that indeed the case? And is that allowed in terms of domestic legislation? Can we reserve jobs for South Africans to the detriment of foreign workers, whether they be skilled or unskilled? Your thoughts on that, please, Mr. President? Okay.
Mark.
Mr. President, Mike Bone from Bloomberg. Mr. President, we understand you due to travel to Dubai next month to attend the expo. Will you be raising the issue of the extradition of the Guptas when you are there with the leadership there, given the central role that Judge Zondo has identified that they played in state capture in his second report? And are you satisfied with the level of cooperation you've been getting from the Emirati authorities in the following
Mr. President, this is Christian Duplessis from Netwerk 24. Mr. President, the report about the July unrest found that the National Security Council, which you chair, did not meet regularly before the unrest. Why was this the case? And do you think that if they met more regularly, the unrest could have been prevented? Secondly, do you see yourself more as a capitalist or more as a socialist? The last question is, what is your opinion involving the situation between Russia and Ukraine and NATO? Thank you.
You want me to answer? From Wendell about the anti-foreigner sentiment. Obviously, we are keeping a watchful eye on the way that people are responding to the presence of people from other countries in our own country. And we have made it clear that, one, as South Africans, we are not xenophobic. We do not hate or people from other countries. And in fact, we embrace people from other countries. And the migration of people is a historical process and event. People do move from one country to another. And it so happens that a number of people have moved to our country, and the number of South Africans have a concern that it's possible that these people are taking their jobs. And we believe that we need to address this issue with the sensitivity that it requires. There certainly is no need by the South Africans or for South Africans to take any action in their own hands. The people who have come here have either come in as either refugees, either economic or political, and we need to make sure that we never have any xenophobic sentiments displayed towards them. And we are obviously aware that there are pockets of groupings that are trying to ferment type of negative attitudes and feelings towards people from other countries. And we are, through our security processes, watching this, and will be completely seeking to prevent South Africans from taking any form of action. Will we be prepared? Yes. Through our security apparatus, we will, and do the best that we can that this does not arise. In the past, what we have also sought to do is to actually play a mediating role between those who may well have this sense of feeling towards people from other countries, and make sure that these things do not result into violence against people from various other countries. Do we want to reserve jobs? There are calls that, react like other countries have done. Other countries have said, in this type of jobs, no foreigners should be allowed. And in fact, many countries on the continent have done that. They've said, this category of work, no foreigners, only locals. Now, there are voices that we should do the same here. Now, it's something that we have not done before. What we've sought to do, which we have now done, is to publish what we call the critical list, skills list rather. The critical skills list would in many ways address this in a very legal way, in a very formal way, and it's apparent to everyone what it is meant to achieve. What it does is it would enable people to bring in those skills that are critical that could be brought into the country. And we are a country that observes and subscribes to rule of law, and we would want all these matters to be handled in a way where we subscribed fully to the precepts of rule of law in this regard. But what we will do is we will seek to avoid any flare-up that will end up being a xenophobic type of event against our people. Yes, I intend to go to the UAE to go and see the expo. As a country, we've got a expo cubicle there, which many people say looks wonderful. And obviously when we get there, we will be able to have discussions, wide-ranging discussions with the government of the UAE, and they will range from general relations between ourselves and other matters where we need to be cooperating on. So have we received cooperation? We have, and some of our officials have been there to talk to them, including people from the NPA, and so the discussions continue to happen between ourselves and the people in the UAE. I do not right this minute have a full line of sight of where those discussions are, but certainly we will have a discussion on a wide range of issues. Christian wants to know if I'm a communist, socialist, or capitalist. Before that, you wanted to know about the NSC. The NSC was resuscitated or revived in the years that I've been president, felt the need, after it had not really met for quite a long time, that we should have the NSC. It so happens that, yes, the meetings have been erratic. As the panel observed, would we have avoided the events that ensued on in July last year? I am not so sure, because the coordinated way that they happened, and also the way that they erupted with a great deal of surprise, may not have. But the one thing that we have now been doing, which I think the report also observes, is that the NSC is meeting and is discussing security matters, and some of the issues that I highlighted as security matters that we need to attend to are going to be supervised and actually properly looked at by the NSC. The Ukraine NATO conflict that's now unfolding is a matter that we are concerned about as South Africans. We've always believed that any conflict, any strife should be solved through discussion, dialogue, and where people collaborate. And in this case as well, we would call on the parties that are involved to step back and have thoroughgoing discussions so that those who might be feeling unsatisfied in the manner that things are unfolding can have an opportunity to outline their positions so that they are able to find solutions. My communists, socialists, or capitalists have always subscribed to what my organization stands for, which is having a mixed economy approach to the economy, where we do have very strong features of private sector as well as public sector, where you are able to mediate the two and find a very, very good outcome, because there are positives on both sides, and that is what I believe would be the full panacea for our economy.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're now going to have some alphabetical extremes by going to Aisha and Ziada. Is there a third hand? MC. So we'll come to the other hands on my left. Aisha?
Good day, Mr. President. I'm Aisha Ismail from ENCA. I have two very diverse questions. And the one is, when can we expect an announcement of the appointment of our new Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court? And secondly, as the President of the Republic of South Africa, what is the one thing that gives you sleepless nights about the current situation in South Africa?
Good afternoon, Mr. President. It's Zianda from Newsroom Africa. Just to follow up on what my colleague said, last week, Mr. President, you basically apologized to the nation for what happened in the July unrest, and you had said that there would be changes made, to the leadership and the security cluster. When exactly is that happening, Mr. President? And who within your security cluster should take responsibility for the July unrest? I know that you said, there would be collective responsibility, but I think the implication of that is you're basically saying that everyone then is incompetent. So where exactly are you placing the blame for what basically that report described as an orgy of violence? Another startling revelation was made by your former defense minister, who had said that the National Security Council failed to sit for about 10 years, and it's only last year that it actually reconvened. I know you've just said that you revived it in your years as president, but when exactly did you revive this National Security Council? Because then that would place some responsibility on you as the Commander-in-Chief for not actually doing so. And just lastly, Mr. President, I think maybe it would be great for you to take us into your confidence about the state of your cabinet somewhat. At various points, your ministers have contradicted you basically publicly, whether we're talking about the former defense minister and the characterization of the July riots, or your tourism minister who was releasing late night statements contradicting your office. It would seem that there's no cohesion, the very cohesion that you say is necessary to run the country. So what exactly is taking place there? Thank you.
Okay.
Is that answer?
Geez, Yanda asked so many things.
There's answer.
That's what I'm here for.
That's what you're here for. Ashra, you want to know when would I be taking decisions on the Chief Justice? I have received the report from the JSC and it's on my desk and I'm giving consideration to it. You can be sure that clearly a decision will be taken shortly. So that one is a decision pending, which will happen soon. What keeps me awake at night, and I am seriously kept awake at night. Is it that bad, eh? Yes, I think it's the state of our economy that keeps me awake, state of unemployment. It's a very difficult thing to have to countenance 11 million people out of work who are not economically engaged in any activity. That is enough to keep me awake at night. And it concerns me a great deal. Zianda wants to know about the changes that are likely to be announced. As I said, there would be. You will get to know when the announcement happens, which is going to be shortly. It will be happening shortly. Who should take responsibility? We did say, and I did say that I take the responsibility, and we take responsibility as a cabinet for the mishap. I think that's what the report said, but even if it hadn't been put in that way by the panel, it is something that we should own up to. And of course you are interested in the real direct consequences of that. Now, obviously, we are very, very aggrieved and sorry that so many people lost their lives through what I call premeditated type of action that was taken by people. And you want to know when did the NSC when was it revived? I'm very bad at dates, but I did realize soon after I became president that we needed to have such a structure. And we did have an NSC meeting even before I appointed Dr. Mufamadi as my new National Security Advisor. So it predates his appointment. And I think Ms. Mapisa Ngakula would be right that during, I would say maybe the 9-year period, the NSC did not meet, but in latter days we have met, and it is true that in the intervening period between when the unrest happened, the NEC had not met, but the NEC was revived back into action or into existence and has had an opportunity to meet and may not have met as regularly as we had anticipated it to meet. Yes, there have been statements that would seem to cause a lack of cohesion, but these things happen in politics, where sometimes messages are not communicated in a way that should demonstrate that very tight level or line of cohesion. And these are matters that we are straightening out as we move on. We are a young democracy, remember, and some democracies have learned over a number of years to streamline a culture, a way of operating, and we will get there too.
Our takers in this round are MC, Thabo Mokone and Jan de Lange, and we'll come back. Thanks. Marianne will do first time is first. Thanks. MC.
Mr. President, regarding the pending appointment of the new Chief Justice,
I don't see who's asked. Oh, okay.
I would like to know what your view was of the exact mandate of the JSC in this regard. Were they delegated to put forth the name of a single preferred candidate? And now that they've done so, how bound do you feel yourself to be by that public recommendation? Or were they supposed to report more broadly on the relative merits of each candidate? And have you had your consultations with the best proposed representatives?
Thabo.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. President, my name is Thabo Mokone. I work for the Sunday Times. My question is linked to what you said in the SoNA around the looming changes you want to make within the state security apparatus. In your own analysis, what is wrong or what do you find to be problematic within the leadership in that space? And then linked to that, there's a public spurt that's currently going on between the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner. What's your take on that? How should that be resolved? Do they still have space, as far as you are concerned, in your security apparatus? Because seemingly you have two votes in one court.
Jan de Lange.
Mr. President, Jan de Lange from the opposite of Sunday Times report newspaper. One of the most intriguing things about state capture to me was the fact that the whole country more or less knew that something seriously was going on. It was discussed in Parliament on many occasions. But Parliament was not able to do anything about it. And I suppose the SoNA Commission will pronounce on it. And I don't want to preempt that, but I want to question. I can't imagine that we can continue with the parliamentary system as it is after what happened. What are your thoughts about this? Can you give us an idea? And more or less related to that, the SoNA was a speech that there was lots of positive reaction to it, and it signaled, it gave a signal that there may be a change in direction or a change in the way. The positive thing that we're going to do, but the negative comments was we've heard this before, we've heard positive things before, and we've been disappointed a lot of times, every cabinet. And one of the things that really damages your credibility is the fact that some of the members of the cabinet, there's a culture in democracies that a minister who makes a mistake pays the price for it. And there are members in your cabinet who didn't pay the price and made serious mistakes. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Okay, those are three questions. You want me to respond? It is MC, is it? Yes. The mandate of the JSC. In the past, what has ensued in the past is the JSC was often given one name, and they would then respond about the suitability of the candidate. We sought to ask the JSC, having gone through a sort of a public process, to see who would be most suitable, or who would be suitable, not necessarily the most suitable, but who would be suitable. So we literally expected a reply that would say, these are the names of the people that we've interviewed who we believe are suitable. They went over that, and they nominated a person. Now, that does not detract from what the role of the president is. The president's role still remains that the president has the authority and the power in the end, after the various consultations with the JSC as well as the parties, to appoint a Chief Justice. That's where we are now. And that's precisely what we are giving consideration. I'm giving consideration to. So we will see how that ensues and what the final outcome of that is. So, and it's quite clear, the political parties will be consulted, and they'll be informed what the decision would be. Thabo asks what is wrong in the security cluster. I guess this is something that we are also going to fully get our fay with when the Zondo Commission process finalizes its report. But it's quite clear from the Mufamadi report, as well as from the panel of experts report, that there are challenges and problems, both at an operational level, as well as at a personnel level, that need to be addressed. Now, the reason why we've flighted the notion that there would be changes is precisely to address some of these challenges that we have seen that are apparent, and it also speaks to what you call the spats between some of the key people for instance, in the police. So that too is a manifestation of some of the problems that we've got in the security or in the police particularly, where people who are supposed to be occupying key positions are seen to be at odds. So the initiative that we are going to put in place will have to be seen to be addressing issues like that. So that is what we will be seeking to do. Jan asks that Parliament knew, and Parliament seemed to be paralyzed over time over these state capture processes, and whether that should not lead us to say, what should Parliament's role be? And clearly, I guess, once the full report of the Zondo Commission comes out, we're then going to be able, because he's going to opine on that, we're going to be able to see the extent to which, if any changes have to be made in the way things function, there should be that type of direction or outcome. And I would say here, and you yourself say, without preempting, we need to wait for that moment. And we don't have long to wait. It's going to happen soon. And then we will have the full report. And as I have said, we will then live up to our commitment that we will examine the full report and thereafter come up with our response, and which will also deal with how we're responding to the recommendations. You talk about a convention, that the normal convention is that when a minister has done something wrong, they should pay the price for what they have done wrong. And clearly, I mean, we are proceeding with this as we move on. There have been situations where ministers have had to depart. They've had to step down because there were things that were not properly done, and there were, say, allegations, and there was wrongdoing, and they needed to do that. Now, clearly, I have said I'd like to wait for the full Zondo Commission report to come out, so that we can see the extent to which any of the colleagues that I work with has anything that they need to be fully answerable to. So these are some of the processes and that we will have to go through. And the good thing is that we appointed a commission which is going to come up with a very objective type of report, which will point to whatever wrongs that were committed in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see a flurry of hands with Marianne reopening a second round. I do want to move us towards a wrap, and I have a question related to the reason the President does have to leave us shortly, and that is his travel to the African Union, European Union Summit. It's the 6th summit in Brussels. And there was a question remotely from Sophie Mokwena asking what your expectations are for that summit, Mr. President. I think let's have some first-time hands, if I may, before we make a return to Marianne and Linda. MC, you are in that second-hand category.
Tyrone, may I assist you? My question is covered. I was on the AU-EU expectations as well. Thank you.
Relief all around. So let me take let me take 2 questions from the centre. Here's 24.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Jason Felix from Mr. I'm over here trying to handle. Mr. President, I just want to ask you, did you watch the JSC interviews, and what did you think of the process? Will you accept the recommendation, or will you simply make up your own mind? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Rihanna Green from SABC. This evening, SCOPA will be meeting to deliberate on, response to their detailed questions. Now, if they resolve to call you to come and appear before them and for purposes of cross-examination, for lack of better word, will you oblige, or will you wait until they summons you to come and appear? Lastly, with regard to the issue of the Chief Justice, in retrospect, do you think the process yielded what you had in mind, or it yielded unintended consequences? In the sense that your predecessors would nominate one candidate as mandated by the Constitution, but you sought to broaden the process. But if you have regard to what transpired and the recommendations of the JSC, now if you ignore that recommendation of the JSC, do you think that you'll run the risk of opening yourself to criticism, that you've missed the opportunity to appoint the first female Chief Justice of South Africa?
Thanks, Vianney. Maybe close then with, if I may, Mr. President, the last three. So it's Sophie Mokoena on AU-EU, Linda round number 2, Ziyanda round number 2, and we call it an afternoon there. Thank you.
Mr. President, this is not meant to be disrespectful. I'm just repeating what was said by commentators. You say that you're a very weak president, you consult too much, you don't take decisions, you repeat yourself year after year. How would you respond?
It's Yanda Ngobo again. I also would just be pointed, Mr. President, are there security concerns around you? Whether you're talking about being whisked away at January 8th or the ANC Women's League event, or even at the most recent State of the Nation address, how real are those threats? And Mr. President, why haven't you intervened in the escalating tensions between the National Police Commissioner and the National Police Minister, which even the report notes had a deadly cost? And also, Mr. President, you've mentioned the Mufamadi report, which you received in 2019. Don't you think that if you'd actually implemented some of the recommendations in that report, that you wouldn't have even had to appoint this most recent panel, and even, you know, the unrest could have been prevented? Thank you.
Should I go? Okay. Well, maybe let's start with Sophie, the AU-EU summit, which is the 6th one. This is an important summit for the African continent. We often have these types of summits, but we usually have them with particular countries like China and Russia and all that. Now this one is an important one because it's with the whole European continent, and we're going to be discussing some very important issues that have to do with economic growth on our continent and how well the European Union could play a supportive role in fostering economic growth on our continent, and to see the extent to which they have a role to play, both historically and going forward, in supporting Africa's growth and fostering economic investment in our continent. So that is top of the agenda, and also looking at our infrastructure development, the extent to which the EU would support the African continent in economic development and infrastructure rollout. We will also be looking at how we strengthen our health systems, particularly in the light of the COVID disaster that has befallen the continent, and look at the support that we can get, for instance, on vaccine manufacturing. So the health systems process is going to be looked at more closely, and I'm particularly keen on this as being the AU COVID champion. So that is going to be an area of focus. We'll also look, which is part of the economic issues, look at trade as well. So all these matters are important in continuing to advance the AU agenda. So there will be quite a number of heads of state and government who will travel to Brussels to participate in this summit. There was a question from a colleague from News 24 on the JSC process, and asking whether with hindsight, the first one I wrote very quickly. The News 24 colleague might want to repeat that, because the one on the CJ, I think, was asked by Vuyani.
It's Jason
Yes.
The first question is, what did you think of the process?
Oh, yes.
Second question is, will you accept the JSC's recommendation, or will you make up your own mind?
Well, as I said, I have received the report. I'm going through the report, and I would like to go through it before I exercise I in the end finally say what I thought of it. I did watch snippets. I didn't watch all of the interviews because the interviews tended to take the whole day, and my full days are usually taken up by a whole number of other things. So I can never say that I watched the interviews in full. I just saw snippets. Some of that was seen on the news as the news broadcasts were summarizing some of it. And as I said, I am going to give attention to what they have recommended. And the Constitution allows the President to decide, so they recommend. So that is very clear in terms of the Constitution. So I think let's leave it there until the President has exercised his mind and has decided. Vuyani wanted to know, now that SCOPA is going through the response that I gave, if they ask me to come, will I go? Yes, of course. I will not wait to be summoned. SCOPA is an important body of our parliamentary architecture. They want even a sitting president to go. I will go and be, as you say, interrogated. I wouldn't see it as an interrogation. I would see it as clarification that they may well want from me. So I have no qualms about that. Did the Chief Justice process yield what I wanted? I think once I've taken the decision, we will then be able to examine that, because we embarked on a process which we discussed with colleagues, and the process has yielded this type of outcome, and it is an outcome that still needs to be sort of subjected through the decision-making process that the Constitution grants the President. So in that regard, I don't really see a problem. Will I open myself to criticism if I do not decide, as the JSC has said? You know, I found that whatever a president does, there will always be criticism. Not everybody agrees with what one does, and that is what happens to the person who takes certain final decision. And as they say in Afrikaans, die hoogste boom vang die meeste wind. The highest tree is the one that catches the fiercest wind. So once you decide, there will be people with different views, and one needs to accept that in a democracy, those people are entitled to express their views. And this is what has often happened, even in our own history, and it certainly happens in other countries as well. So you take decisions, and sometimes when you take decisions, you are damned, and sometimes when you don't take a decision, you are still damned. So that's par for the course, as they say in the classics. Linda, yes, I know it's precisely what I've just said now. There are certain people who will hold the view that you should consult less and take decisions and be decisive and even dictatorial, and that makes you a strong president. And sometimes when you do, they say you are a dictatorial president. So it's, there are horses for courses in all these things most of the time. What I have often said is that I'm here to do my work, and in doing my work, I possibly have my own way of doing it. And if on certain issues I consult and am consultative, that's great. And on certain issues, if I don't consult, that should also be accepted. So it's a par for the course, as they say in golf parlance. Zianda wanted to know, I wrote something, WL, I don't know whether that stands for Women's League.
Yeah.
What did?
Are there any security concerns around you? So
Oh yes, the event I went to. The event I went to in Polokwane, in my view, had more to do with COVID-related concerns than security concerns. If anything, the security element would have been health concerns. I went into the hall, and I was quite relaxed, by the way, and was very keen to participate with the women who had gathered there, and was looking forward to delivering the lecture, all set and prepared. And all of a sudden, one of my security details then says, "We must go, we must go." And I wondered what it was for. And they say, when you are in my position, don't ever ask the security person twice. You must do as they say. So later I got to be briefed that no, the meeting was oversubscribed. There were many more people in the hall than there should have been. And that led to the violation of COVID regulations. And the president of the Women's League came to apologize herself and said, "We are sorry, we didn't pay attention, we should have limited the number," but it shows the enthusiasm of the women in the area who wanted to listen to the lecture that I was going to give, the Lillian Goy lecture. I was rather disappointed not having had time to interact with the women. And then there was the state dinner. The dinner. The fundraising. And when the lights went out, that too came as a bit of a surprise. And they thought there was, once the lights went out, they must bundle me and the deputy president out. I didn't feel threatened. I regretted, and I was hungry. I wanted to eat. So they denied me of having a plate of food, and I was bundled away. I guess, there are people whose job is to look after the security of a person like myself, but I didn't feel threatened, and I didn't feel it was so much, it was a security risk at all. With regard to the Mufamadi report, the report came out, and in the SSA, a process was started to have the report implemented, and it also involved some further investigations that needed to be done, and that is what has taken time. Would that have prevented the July events? I doubt it very much. I really do. But of course, we are now more than committed to implement that report because the report contained a number of important recommendations that needed to be put in place. With us going forward now, with our eyes firmly on revamping our security, we will, as a nation, we are going to be implementing all that. The NSC is meeting more regularly, and it's going to be looking at everything that needs to be done to make sure that the security of our people and our country is properly managed and handled. Thank you. There was another question.
Yes.
Which was?
The question was about the escalating tensions between the police
Oh, yes.
commissioner and the
Yes.
minister, and how that's obviously affected the operations of
Yeah.
the security cluster.
Yes. Well, I thought I did answer that, but to the extent that you feel I didn't, it concerns me, and it's a matter that I'm paying attention to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues in the media. I would now like to invite Minister Kungubele to pass a vote of thanks and to bring the session to a close. Thank you, Minister.
Vote of thanks to me, right?
I agree, Mr. President. I forgot to do that. First, thank you for this opportunity to talk to the media community of your country. We thank you very much. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful session. But as we close, I just wanted to share with you that I had a session with the President. The President has made undertaking that this year there will be regular sessions with yourselves. It's a question of coming with the dates, maybe twice a year or 4 times a year. But we're going to work on that. But on condition that one of the times will be a dinner where you don't discuss what you're discussing today. Talk about Barcelona, Kaizer Chiefs, Stars. That's one condition, that you will commit to that. I'm sure you accept that. Have a dinner with the President. Don't discuss COVID or the police situation. Just have a dinner with him as an ordinary South African. You agree? No, they like that.
But he's extraordinary.
A dinner once a month.
Or a dinner with the President. But you'll be discussing with the President, who's a South African, who's also interested in discussing South African life in general. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and
Thank you very
gentlemen.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.